Joining me right now on the telephone is Fox News strategic analyst, General Jack Keane. And General, you were with me earlier this week, and you said, look, the Iranians have a choice, come to the negotiating table or dig in here. What do you think about this strike that some people are saying was a move to save face? Yes, you know, put these bombs in place, but not hurt anybody, not impact the troops, just to save face. What's your take?
Yeah, Maria, I think this is what de-escalation looks like. I think we've restored deterrence once again by President Trump's move and taking down Soleimani, which was completely unexpected. It was a stunning surprise to the Iranians. As I said earlier in the week, I believe that Keane, this is his professional associate for 20 years and also his personal friend. He did all of his execution of Iran's foreign adventures and foreign wars. I believe at that time, when that took place, that we had an opportunity. And the opportunity was to reach out to them and start talking to them about a general framework for negotiations. And if they want to do it covertly and secretly, fine. If that's too much political heat for them to be able to do that publicly. And I believe that even more so now. When you think about what was available to them, we had 80,000 troops in the area. We have ground bases, naval bases, and air bases, all where U.S. troops dominate those bases. They attacked 2 Iraqi bases which houses some U.S. troops. The largest base that houses troops in Iraq is Balad, and it's actually closer to Iran, and they did not attack that base, because likely that would have been certain U.S. casualties if they did. So I do think they had to retaliate. There's no doubt about that. But they did about as minimalist a retaliation they could possibly do. Now, people are making a big deal about it, that it came from Iran. Well, listen, they did not want their proxies in charge of this retaliation because they're afraid to go nuts on them. And they wouldn't be able to control them.
I see.
They fired these missiles themselves. One, they have better missiles than their proxies have in terms of rockets, and they can control them more because they're more precision-type weapons. And they absolutely did not want to delegate something as serious as this, a retaliation strike after the death of Soleimani, and let that retaliation strike get out of control. So I think the fact that they fired it, while it's the first time in years from Iranian soil an attack has been made, and it's not been driven by the proxies, I believe it's more significant in the sense that they absolutely wanted to control the outcome.
Yeah, really fascinating stuff. I mean, so what becomes the response from the United States? I mean, on Sunday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo joined me, and I asked him then about the possibility of Iran retaliating against U.S. bases in the region, and now they've done so, not impacting any lives. So where does the U.S. come out? Listen to Pompeo on Sunday, sir. Watch this. Should we be concerned that this is where the focus is in terms of a retaliation on any basis we have in our proxies, the proxies and partnerships of Iran?
Yes, Marie, we think there's a real likelihood that Iran will make a mistake and make a decision to go after some of our forces, whether they're the military forces there in Iraq or our soldiers that are in northeast Syria. We have many troops in the region. It would be a big mistake for Iran to go after them, but we are preparing.
So, General, the U.S., it's the next move here. The president's going to be speaking this morning. He said he will be talking to the nation. What are you expecting the U.S.'s move to be now?
Well, first of all, I think we have some indicators. For the last year, the Iranians have used provocation to try to create a crisis in the Middle East to put pressure on the United States to back off on the sanctions. And that started with shooting down an American drone, blowing up and seizing tankers, hitting oil production facilities, most notably the largest one in the Middle East and the Saudi oil fields, by the way, with a high degree of accuracy, I may add, and then attacking U.S. bases, attacking bases where U.S. soldiers were housed 10 times. And the president did not respond to any of those except through offensive cyber attack, but no kinetic attack. And it wasn't until the 11th one that he responded. I didn't agree with all of that, to be frank about it, in full disclosure. But nonetheless, I think it absolutely gave him far more legitimacy when he did attack Soleimani, that he had exercised so much restraint for a year. I think that gives us a window in terms of what options he would be leaning towards today. Obviously, he can go back and hit these launch sites from which these rockets came. He can hit oil refineries, etc. That would just continue the ladder of escalation if we did that. I believe the ball is in his court exactly where he wanted it to be. He's got three objectives. One, no nuclear weapons. Two, get rid of your ballistic missiles, the delivery system for those nuclear weapons. Three, change your behavior, your aggressive and malign behavior in the region. Stop trying to dominate the countries of the region. He now has an opportunity, I believe, to move to discuss those objectives with the Iranians, which has been his strategic objective all along.
Is there any chance that the U.S. forces get pushed out of Iraq?
Well, Sony, that's in the hands of the Iraqis, but I don't think we actually saw the real feelings in the vote that just took place over the weekend.
Right.
That was Kataib Hezbollah using intimidation and coercion with the 170-something members that showed up. The Sunnis didn't show up. The Kurds didn't show up. And even among the Shia, Maria, hundreds of thousands of Shia have been demonstrating for weeks against the Iraqi regime and the Iranians' backing of that regime because it's ineffective, it's corrupt, and the quality of life experience has gone down, not up.
That's what I thought. I thought that somebody else's hands were on that in terms of the vote. I think you make a really important point. Well, look, we're waiting for the president to speak. We'll get more information then. General, it's always a pleasure. We appreciate your insights this morning.
Yeah, good talking to you, Maria. Take care.
General Jack Keane joining us there on the telephone.